Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Hello again. It's Mathew Heggem, the founder and CEO of 10kcreators.com. And we are back again for another exciting episode, talking to another artist who I've been working with for, I guess we've been working for now almost 2 years. It's kind of crazy, right? So it's been a hot sec. And I'm really excited about this episode. Last time, if you are watching these in order, you met Stefan Durrett. Stefan has an amazing career on Broadway. He's managing multiple businesses and just figuring out how to live the life as he, welcomes his new kid into his life and, all the things that happen in terms of managing one's creative career and the dynamics around money that comes with that. So we have another fascinating and awesome episode planned for you today. We're going to ask some of the same questions so you can kind of get a sense of some of the trends that occur in the life of an artist navigating this entrepreneurial path. But of course, our guest today has her own story. So you'll hear some unique insights about her journey as well. But before I introduce our guest and pass the ball to Sofia to introduce herself more effectively, I'm going to pass it over to Mel to say a few words about Smartistry. And maybe Mel, this time I'm going to ask you, what is exciting for you about this conversation in the Smartistry community?
Oh, that's a great question. And thanks, Mathew, and thanks, Sophia, for being here. I am the founder of Smartistry. We're an organization that is really dedicated to helping creative people thrive. We do a lot of that through financial literacy education. We do a lot of that through content and sharing information about speaking about money and our mindset around money as creative people and some of the challenges that we have experienced. So I'm really excited about today's episode because I am really just yearning to learn more about Sofia and the work that you do. I read your mission statement on your website, and it blew me away. So I definitely would love for you to share that with the listeners and viewers on this episode. You are so authentic in how you put yourself across on your web presence and your space. So thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, so before we pass the ball to you, Sophia, I just want to remind our listeners the title of our conversation is Creative Success, Navigating Our Money Journey. So we are going to talk, of course, about the money side of being an artist and an arts entrepreneur. But I think I want to, and I started our last episode this way, and I want to start it the same way with you, Sophia. And that's to say what I've loved about and appreciated about working with you as a client of 10K Creators. I think what I've loved the most about working with you is, well, a couple of things. One, I love that you really kind of play and have fun on social media. To be fair, your Instagram is probably one of the more interesting Instagram accounts that I follow. And I think the reason why is because you bring your sort of multifaceted creativity to the table, right? It's like, because the truth is I know that you are an excellent painter and sketcher and drawer. I know that you can do this, but actually it's somewhere around here. But I met you as the person who did what is it? It's this color. Yeah, the copper wire, right? The copper wiring. And I also know that you're an art teacher. And one of the things that's really inspiring about our collaboration and the chances that we've had to work together, I very distinctly remember when you came out with your women's reproductive rights line, and we actually entered into a conversation with a nonprofit about raising money, right? And I'm personally drawn to your work because I feel and get the sense that of sort of that personal mission, and it's interesting that Mel kind of highlighted that. So actually, why don't we start there? Why don't we maybe have you share a little bit about who you are as an artist, kind of give people the gamut of what you do, and then maybe speak a little bit to that mission statement piece so that people can understand what motivates you as an arts entrepreneur.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I'm an artist myself and an art teacher. I have been working as an arts educator for over 15 years in different settings, sometimes like private ceramic studios. I I worked for Boys and Girls Club for a long time, which was ages 6 through 18. I've taught at the college level. I currently teach at an elementary school. So my range of people that I've worked with is pretty vast. And then that also includes the types of projects that I've been able to do. In some settings, I'm doing projects aligned with curriculum that the students are learning. Sometimes it is just learning from an individual what their imagination is drawn to and how I can facilitate that. Like giving them tips on materials, or let's try and experiment with this concept or this technique. And I'd say experimentation is probably the lens that I try and push the most with the students that I've had, as far as you just never know what is going to resonate with you, and you never know what is going to happen until you try. And so I like to give my students the tools of like your basic skills and your foundations, but then I want you to push the envelope. I want you to break the rules. I want you to really explore what speaks to yourself. And that really comes from when I was in undergraduate school. I I was an art student. I took art classes, and there was always like assignments of what to do and techniques to learn. And then I finally had this one painting teacher that taught us how to paint in abstract form. And I'd never done abstract painting before. I always hated abstract art in all the art history classes. Like I couldn't recognize the difference between like good quality and bad quality. To me, it just all looked the same until I started learning how to do it myself. And then it was like, oh, wow, there's so much freedom in not having this assignment of or expectation of what it's supposed to look like at the end. And so that's something that I really push with the people that I work with, and especially children, of finding that confidence of that there's not a right or wrong answer, that not everything is, black and white, that it might take you 5 minutes and have a masterpiece. It might take you 5 months, and that's okay.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate you actually taking us back a little bit to like an experience you had in college. But actually, I want you to go maybe back even further, right? Because one of the things I know we've talked about is, access to arts education, right? In the last episode with Stefan, we talked about how underfunded, or one of the things we mentioned was the just pure lack of funding in the arts, right? For in terms of professional compensation, even for people who are well qualified and doing things like performing on Broadway, it's still not enough money, right, to make all the ends meet. And so in the context of some of our conversations, we've talked about, I think, the lack of funding on a sort of larger scale trickles down to therefore a deprioritization of the education of arts, which means that our kids are not getting access to well-rounded arts education. And you're on the front lines teaching these young people how to understand the power of art and explore their own creative voice. But how did you actually get exposed? Like, what was your first art class or your first art experience? And how did you get supported, particularly in your youngest years, in finding and then nurturing that creative voice inside of you?
Yeah, I was fortunate that my parents really value art and always encouraged that in me. They knew that I was drawn to it, that I wanted to do it. And so I just always had art supplies available for me at home, and I was always doing something, crafting, creating, whether it was like making weird outfits for my Barbie dolls, or painting and trying to sell it to my neighbors for like a quarter. But I did not have art at school. There was no art teacher. There was no art classroom at my school. And even though I'm an art teacher myself, I sometimes forget that schools have art. And so what Matthew was talking about, the context of our conversation, just this week, I was telling him how my husband came to my job recently and got to see my classroom, because I didn't used to have an art classroom at my school. And so he got to see my classroom, and he walks in and he goes, wow, it smells like art class. And he just had all these like nostalgic memories just like flash before him. And I got this like moment of jealousy inside of like, what? He got to have art in school when he was a kid? As I'm an art teacher at a school, I had that thought. And that's just like, that really struck me of like how strange or how unjust that is, that that it's not automatic for everybody to have access to those things. And one of the reasons is because it's not valued. So when fundings get cut, art is, whether it's visual arts or performing arts, that those are often, the first to get cut from a school or a program or an organization. Yet we don't talk about how much it is intertwined in everything that everybody does, whether it is the design of your phone, whether it is the games that you play on your computer, the shoes that you wear, the TV that you watch, like those all have artists involved with them. And the fact that we don't talk to kids about the viable careers that you can have as an artist, is such a disservice. And so people don't think that they can go into it for a career, and people don't think that it should be funded and valued as, an important part of education. Like I remember when STEM programming was becoming more popular, as like coined with that acronym of STEM. And for a short time, it was called STEAM because art was part of the acronym. And that lasted for a very short time. And then it became STEM. And I've never heard anybody talk about STEAM since then. And that's really frustrating. And so I try and talk about that with my students. I'm like, okay, you're playing with these little toys. Somebody designed that. That was an artist. You like this video game. That was an artist who's playing the music behind what you're doing, or who designed, the characters on there and stuff. And those conversations need to be as natural as all the other career conversations that we have.
It's a self-sustaining cycle too, isn't it? Because then the students who maybe feel called to art and don't have a resource for that, they internalize a sense that that's not a worthy pursuit, that they must not need to do that because the school is not serving it, and that produces artists who later in life are afraid to ask for what they're worth, afraid to, even think about art as legitimate work. And on the cycle goes, right?
Yeah. And we need to disrupt what's out there, because I also recall, like when I was going to college and I was studying art, people would comment sometimes of being like, wow, I can't believe your parents let you be an art major. You're so lucky. I'm, going to be a nurse because that's the only option my parents were okay with. But then at the same time, when I'm in art school with other artists who are teaching these courses and stuff, they weren't talking about the different things that we could do for careers. Yet being an art professor wasn't, their sustainable income. That was one of their income revenues. That was streams of income. They're also in galleries, or some of them design products, but there was this like separation of what's fine art and what's commercial art or what's design. And even though we might be learning about architecture or furniture in the historical context of how it disrupted things, you know, in the 60s or in the 20s and stuff. They weren't talking about how people are still doing that. People are still straddling the line of how do I make money? How do I still fulfill my creative expression? And that wasn't talked about in art school, nor was it talked about like what it costs to like go into debt to get an education, and then how do you pay for that when you leave. And so there was like this pushing of like, yeah, get into galleries, yeah, you know, go to artist residencies, but not like, hey, you're going to need to also get some jobs. These are some really great ways to do that so that you have the skills to stay creative and have a good career.
So we're going to get into the conversation about, I mean, we've talked about compensation a little bit, and I think that brings up the question about money, and we'll get to the money conversation more in depth in a moment. But before we do, I kind of want to gain like some perspective from you. I mean, you've been teaching people art. You've been, obviously you educated yourself in the world of art. And you're now running your business and making things and putting things online and doing the thing. What, as an artist, what is something that you've learned about yourself on this journey over, let's say, the last 2 or 3 years? What's something that sort of like stands out for you as a key insight based on some of the experiences you've had up to this point?
I have to be true to myself. Otherwise, I don't have the drive to keep it up or whatever. And sometimes that changes. Sometimes I'm really passionate about one thing and I'm trying to make that work. And, sometimes that's fulfilling enough as an artist, but sometimes, we can't deny that external appreciation makes a difference in the work that we do, whether you're dancing or making music or creating visual art. That external validation and appreciation can really have an effect. And so how do you find the balance of what still feels true to yourself and not just chasing what is going viral or getting excited for by other people? And so yeah, that's challenging to find the balance. So I guess what I've learned from myself about myself, I guess trying to have more grace with myself and try again, to not give up. I will romanticize the idea of, oh, I would love to have this morning routine that I start out with in my sketchbook of, or a warm up of some sort of art making. And then I go into the studio and I've got this project that I'm continuing to work on. And I've tried to, fit that in with my life, but I'm a mom, I am a teacher, I have all these other life responsibilities, and that romantic side, that romantic routine might not ever be what works for me, or it might not be for a while, but I still got to keep trying things. I can't let that disappear from me.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So now let's talk about the money side of it. What and maybe I guess we kind of like to go back to the beginning as well and maybe start to reflect on, we as kids, we learn things about money. We grow up inside of a context around money. There's unspoken rules and expectations around money. And even earlier you had mentioned something to the likes of that, other students perceived you as being lucky to be able to go and pursue art as education. And that kind of implies that these other students had maybe rules about what could make money and what couldn't make money. So I'm kind of curious, like coming into the world as an artist, what were some of those maybe more influential or original money stories that you carried with you? Maybe something that your parents taught you about money, whether or not that's changed or not. I'm kind of curious what you kind of started out with in the context of the money conversation.
Well, I'd say I was fortunate to be in a family that allowed me to pursue trying to make it in the art world. I worked at a gallery. I've worked for a ceramic artist. I've worked in teaching. Um, I've done a lot of different things, and it was a hustle. And I had a family to fall back on if things didn't work. Now, we weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. My parents were working class. My mom is a teacher, and my dad was a blacksmith. So, um, there was, I guess, grace in being able to pursue those things, but at the same time, money wasn't a conversation that we had. And I think I could have really benefited from more of that conversation. And so I'm kind of coming to it a little bit later in life, I feel like, of trying to educate myself of what do I need to do if I want to keep doing this? And what do I need to talk about if I'm going to encourage other people to pursue creative expression, whether that is, just a personal hobby or whether, they want that to be their main career. I'm not sure if I answered your question. I kind of lost track of what you asked me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, you're getting there. I mean, I'm curious, and I guess I'll sort of tack on to it to kind of fuel the development of the narrative a little bit. And my curiosity is, we learn certain things about money when we're younger, and they made those lessons made sense at the time, right? Because that's what made it possible for your parents to put food on the table, or for you to get to school, or to get your education, and so it's like those rules made sense, and part of that's what they carried on from whatever their generation was dealing with. But then over time, sometimes those things don't work out the way, like those lessons don't work anymore, right? For one reason or another, whether it's because our society has changed and the needs of our society have changed. Like, for example, in the episode with Stefan, one of the things that we talked about was, nowadays it's like having a household with two incomes is kind of expected, especially if you have a kid, let alone two kids. And even then, it's kind of not enough money, right? I think there was a version of living that maybe our parents had access to, relatively speaking, where a single working parent could kind of make it work. It doesn't seem to be the case anymore, right? And so I think and there's a lot packed in there around gender and politics around society and yada yada yada. So clearly the culture has changed, right, that we're inside of, but also on an individual level, right? Like, one of the things that has come up for me is, I grew up in a poor household with little money, and so every penny counted, right? And you would literally count the pennies, and you would ration out the money, and you'd be very specific about what got spent on what. And then as I got older, I realized that worrying about the pennies might not be where my energy is best spent, right? Because actually it is worth it to spend the $2 extra for that thing because it's better for you, or because it buys you more time. You know what I'm saying? And so that same sort of way of thinking no longer serves me in the context of my personal life today, right? And so I'm curious, if you look back at your life and maybe some of the money experiences or stories that you've had, is there anything in there where you're like, Yeah, my attitude or my perspective about this has changed because of this, and here's what I think now. I'm curious, like I'm curious what has changed for you in the context of money as you've particularly as you've entered into the space of being an entrepreneur and a small business owner, which brings up a whole other set of challenges around your relationship to money, both on a functional level and on a more emotional level as well.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, as a household, as a family, my husband and I have really talked about that. Yes, we value like our health, and that instead of doing this other stuff, we would rather save that money towards, buying better quality meat from a farm. Um, and so maybe we're not going on, a big vacation or have, like a fancy car or anything like that. But, you know, our quality of life is is very valuable to us, and we make choices around that. And so that also kind of like drives us as entrepreneurs. He has his own business, and so I've learned a lot from him as far as running a business, as far as financial literacy, um, that these are the things that we want in life. And the career that I'm in as an art teacher can't provide what I want to provide for my family. So, and I'm tired of waiting for somebody else to make the decisions for me of what my value is, of what I deserve for my paycheck, and what my schedule should be like, and what um, time I can spend with my family. So we're working really hard on our businesses, um, to create more freedom for ourselves to pursue what we want, to pursue his health and wellness coaching, and his business, for me to be able to make art the way that I want to and spend time with my family. And um, and so that has, helped light the fire of learning financial literacy and business strategy and what it takes to be a working artist.
I I wanted to comment on something that you just said, because this has come up in lots of conversations with artists, which is about how we personally define success and how we decide what we want our lives to look like as creative people. There is not, obviously, there's not one formula, there's not one, singular measure of success. But I know a lot of folks, a lot of young students, as they think about becoming an artist, think that fame and fortune is it. And, you know, we have an opportunity to point them towards time richness and community and family and other value metrics um, that are fulfilling. But I don't think that they really consider that. And I also think a lot of parents of young artists don't get that piece either. Would you agree?
I agree. Yeah, definitely. Um, I think it's important to have conversations with other people, and writing. Maybe it's, writing down what you think you might value um, in your life, of, looking at it on the daily, looking at it like sort of monthly, yearly, and even like, long term, where do you want to be in 5 years? What do you see yourself doing in 20 years? What is going to help you achieve that? Those are conversations that my husband and I have. And he really brought that into this relationship, because that wasn't part of my family culture. And it wasn't part of his family culture either. That is something that he started doing as he built his own business and built his own career, and was talking to other people. How did they build their business? How are you successful in being able to do what you do? And how can we apply that to what we want? And so listening to other people who have done it before, whether they're younger than you or older than you, you're going to get some value from that. But finding the people that you can have those conversations with, or finding the people that you can hear them having those conversations with other people, helps to kind of put in perspective of be like, oh yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, and I really like what they say, and maybe that's something that I should look to apply in my life. Or it's what, that doesn't align with what I want, but they're able to achieve what they want because they've done these other things, and that looks like something that I could apply to the goals that I have for myself.
Well, and what's coming to me right now is a couple of things. I think, and I'm really glad, Mel, that you brought up that piece about like the standard being fame or some level of notoriety is like, oh, well, you're not good enough as an artist unless you've achieved that. And if you can't achieve it because you're not a protege or whatever the word, right, or prodigy, then like don't even bother, right? And that's, I think, where a lot of kids get cut short because, oh, you couldn't figure it out when you were in elementary or middle school. We're not even going to try in high school. Go learn science. Go get a degree in law or whatever, and that's it, done. But the truth is, whether you're an artist or an accountant or a nurse or insert title here, everybody it has ups and downs with money. It's not relegated to artists, and that if you're an artist, it's some unique breed of financial chaos that you're going to live inside of, right? Like I know plenty of non-artists who live in financial chaos because of other reasons. And I think what you bring forward, Sophia, that I really appreciate is this piece around values. And it goes back to what you said earlier about how, one of the takeaways you've had in reflecting on your career is this piece around knowing who you are. And part of knowing who you are is knowing what you find to be important in the world, and then living into those and letting that be the guiding light or guiding force around how you choose to work with money as a tool in your life, whether you have $5 or $50, right? If you value a certain quality of food, of the $5, you'll relatively speaking allocate the appropriate portion to the kind of food that you want, right? And so I really appreciate that framework. And the other thing that kind of comes to mind too, and maybe if you could share just a few words about this, is everybody has a different relationship to talking about money, right? But I think generally speaking, to be honest, I feel like my observation is that most people don't like talking about money. They're afraid to talk about money. They have anxiety around talking about money. And even when they do start talking about money, either it's coming from a place of fear, right? And they're worried about it, or they're concerned about it, or it's, you just aren't getting the full picture, right? Like there's not complete transparency. It's like, I sometimes fantasize about, yeah, right? Like I sometimes fantasize about, okay, well, what if we all saw each other's bank balances and knew what each other's credit card debt was? Like, hi, my name's Matthew, and I have $10,000 in credit card debt, and I have $47 in my bank account. What about you, right? And like all of a sudden, it's like, okay, how does that change the experience that you're having with another person, right? And anyway, so I asked that because you talk about family, right? And a lot of the money stories we carry from our family into the future. And in the context of your family, like what are some of the things that you're choosing to do? And I want to be explicit about this. Like, what are some of the practices or behaviors you're choosing to say yes to as you create your family's relationship to money?
Yeah. So this is something that you and I talked about like a year ago of like, I don't remember what I asked you, but I remember I needed to go over some financial stuff, and you suggested making it like a date night between my husband and I. Light some candles, like set the mood, like make it enjoyable. It's going to be difficult. Try to make it less difficult. And we kind of like did our own version of it where we have what we call eggs and bacon. And Sunday mornings, we, cook up a good brunch and we go over financial stuff. Sometimes it's not as prioritized and it's maybe only 5 minutes of like, okay, what needs to get covered this week? And then sometimes we're, like opening up bills together. We're having the more difficult conversations, but we're trying to normalize having those conversations so that it's less difficult when we have to bring something to the table. Like, there was something that I'd kind of dropped the ball on and I felt really embarrassed about it. And, my husband had made the safe space for me to share about it. And because we're doing it regularly, we're building that muscle. And that's something that we want to build between the two of us, because if we are going to really just knock the socks off this and get really successful, we need to have these conversations. And if we want to put our daughter in the best position she can be in for, her financial literacy and her financial future, that she's brought into those conversations. She's like 6 months old. So obviously those conversations aren't happening yet, but she's at the breakfast table with us when we're doing it, like we don't plan on like keeping that separate from our children. And that's something that both of us, we didn't have from our families, that our parents didn't talk about. And I think that's kind of the norm, that most families don't talk about those things. And I don't even know how much couples talk about it between each other, because I was on the child end for so long. So what do parents talk about together is also often a mystery. And I mean, like we mentioned at the beginning of the call, like the importance of arts education and valuing that, I think it's such a disservice that math is not taught through the lens of financial literacy, because we all need it. That's why we're all like trying to figure it out as adults through Instagram posts.
For better or worse. Oh my God. Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
Like, it's amazing how like I've gotten like more education through like a meme sometimes than I have from a place that I went in debt for to get my education.
All right, so we have a couple more questions for you before we close our conversation today. And so really there's 3 questions, right? So to be clear. So the next question I have for you, and this is a question we're asking everybody, because we want to imagine a new future, right? We want to cast the possibility for something different to occur in our world so that future generations of artists don't have to deal with the same BS that we've had to deal with, at least at a lesser degree. So if you could sort of wave the magic wand and change something about the creative sector right? What, and that's a pretty broad, broad possibility. Like, what's maybe one thing that you would change for the future, for the better?
I'd say it's not specifically towards creative, but I'm going to couple it with it, because this is something that whenever somebody's asked me if I had a magic wand, or if I had 3 wishes, what would I wish for? And one of them was compassion. I think we lost touch, or maybe we were never really in touch largely with compassion, and like what that would change if we had compassion. If you had compassion for yourself, would you feel less emotional when you tried to draw something and it didn't come out the way you wanted it to? Or would you have more compassion for why somebody thinks it's important for there to be dance classes at school, or for any gender to be in a dance class without being stigmatized? And I feel like so many problems in the world would sort of dissolve if people started with compassion first.
Yeah, agreed. That's a good one. All right, so second to last question here. So you're standing in a room full of anxious college students who are about to go on to their careers, right, and enter the quote real world. That was often referred to in my life, at least. Uh, right. What does that really mean? I think it's been pretty real up to that point, but whatever. All right. So now, and they're asking you, like, okay, we want to be artists. We want to go down this path and live this career and make some smart money choices along the way. What's that sort of one piece of advice that you would give that group of students about to embark on that journey?
I guess my advice would be, don't limit yourself to one path in a creative field. Like, just because you were trained in this skill set doesn't mean that that is your jumping off point. Like, you might take a total left turn with that. And so how do you discover that? Maybe it's an internship, maybe it is your favorite YouTuber that does this particular thing. Can you look them up on maybe LinkedIn and see like the career path that they've taken? Maybe that'll give you more compassion for doing this other job while you're honing this skill. Or maybe it opens up your idea of where you could use your skills in a company that's maybe not a creative company, but they have creative employees. So doing that research, trying to find a mentor, I think that is really helpful too, whether it is a business mentor or a career path mentor, an artist mentor, somebody else. You don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, word. All right, so last question for you. How do people get in touch with you, Sofia?
Thank you. I am most active on Instagram at Sofia Sharpe Studios. So that's Sofia, Sofia, Sharpe, Sharpe Studios. So Instagram's my most active place. And then my website is sofiasharpe.com. And those would be the two best ways to see what I do and to reach out, say hello, ask a question, check out anything that the merchandise that I have. Yeah.
Yay. Thank you, Sofia. Mel, do you have any other parting comments or words before we close our stream today?
Well, I wanted to come back to where we started, which was your mission statement. And it's amazing, and I encourage everyone to check out your website so that they can read the full thing. but could you give us like the Reader's Digest version of what moves and compels you and what you're trying to create in the world?
Yes. Well, I mean, I could read it really quickly. It's not that long. Why I fight for art.
Talk me out.
I explore work that seeks to align the healing components of self-expression through artistic endeavors. I move my body, create visual art, explore digital media, and make jewelry. My offerings include private, small groups, workshops, mentoring, while championing the healing properties of creative expression to help you find your own voice. Art is a language that has not been prioritized as a valuable form of communication. We have been cultured to believe that only a few have access to creative expression or appreciation of it, and that its existence is binary, hobby versus elite. This limitation has been our obstacle in receiving the healing benefits we can experience through the arts. The creative frequency is an amazing world that celebrates the freedom to be your authentic self, welcoming the freaks, weirdos, the thinkers, makers, the questioners, disruptors, contemplators, daydreamers, the awkward, the graceful hippos, and the blundering butterflies, the loud mouse, the whomever the fuck you need to be today that differs from whoever the fuck you will be tomorrow. Come with me as we art all over the damn place. So yeah, that's on my website, and art I feel like has saved my life in so many different ways. It is who I am. It is how I feel most authentically me, and it feels so good to be proud of something and explore that. And it, as a teacher, it's amazing to see that develop in other people. And like I can't describe what that feels like. There's nothing parallel that I've found when that happens for myself or for somebody else too.
Yay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. On that note, everyone go find Sofia Sharpe on Instagram. I highly recommend following her on Instagram. Very inspirational and informative and educational and funny. And you get to meet the little baby. And there's some fun trials and tribulations along the way. I won't mention the one that most recently caught my attention. You'll have to go find it. It was hilarious. But anyways, Mel, it was a pleasure sharing the space with you as well. Everyone, for those of you who are watching and listening, thank you for listening. Thank you for valuing the arts. Thank you for being an artist. Thank you for choosing to stay dedicated and committed to your craft, whatever that might mean, and know that you are on the path towards your success. So stay strong, stay courageous, and keep fighting the good fight, because it is a little bit of a fight sometimes, but we got this, and we got this when we're together. So have a beautiful day. Thank you.
Thank you all.